everyone, welcome to another installment of GoTo's live Ask Me Anything sessions. My name's Adele. I'm a software developer at Trifork Amsterdam. Really happy to be hosting this session today, featuring none other than Northern Ireland's two most experienced software trainers, not one, but two, and all-round awesome blokes, Garth Gilmour and Eamonn Boyle. So hi, Garth.
Hi there.
Hey, and hi, Eamonn.
Hi, Adele. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Happy now. So Garth and Eamonn, they both work at Instill, which is in Belfast. They have been in the industry for a really long time, and they have an impressive speaking record. They will be continuing that awesome work by speaking at GoTo Amsterdam and Aarhus conferences, which are planned for later in the year. So just lastly, to round up this intro, we do have some more AMA sessions and online events coming up. So please just follow us at GoToCon on Twitter to stay up to date with the latest news. So just before we move on with today's session, you may not have noticed, although you probably have, it's been probably too painfully clear. We did just pass a recent milestone of the 1 year working from home or in lockdown since COVID started. So for today, our question is, how has your year been? So please just respond to that one in the chat on the stream, and maybe we'll tease out those answers as we go. So while you're busy with that and decompressing that question, I will go over today's schedule. So the plan for today is that we'll go with the pre-submitted questions, pick up some live questions as we go. So if you didn't get a chance to submit a question ahead of time, that's absolutely fine. It's not too late. Just type it in there in the chat on the YouTube stream. What we'll do is, to kick things off, I'll start with you, Garth. I'm actually going to give you the same question that's in our chat. How has your year been?
This time last year, I think it would be fair to say I was very, very scared because prior to the pandemic, we had a wonderful plan for the year. We had a bunch of classroom-based training sorted out. We were doing conference workshops. All the clients that we do our graduate academies with had renewed and so on. And then all of that just came to a kind of screaming, frightening stop. There was lots of personal worry, of course, but at a professional level, it was, can we take our show virtual? Can we make virtual training a thing? And it was really like going back to being a new company because, we had to go back to our existing clients and persuade them that we could do what we do in a virtual way and get them to trust us, so build trust up almost from the basement. But we've managed to climb that hill, thank goodness, and we're back to almost normal levels of business. So it's been a very, very busy year.
Yeah, I suppose that you're not alone, especially people that are in that online training conference kind of space. So, Eamonn, same question. How's your year been?
Yeah, pretty much the same as what Garth's saying there. I mean, when it all started, I was actually on a development project, and the project was at a stage where, the team all knew each other. We were sort of being pretty effective. So we were in a pretty good state that when we sort of started working from home, we already had momentum, so it was pretty good. And then whenever I transitioned back into the training team, Garth and my colleague Ryan had basically done all the hard work and handled all of the worry and the stress. So I just came back to, now we do remote training, and clients seem to like it. So that was a lot less stressful for me. Everything sort of in the year has been more, in my sort of personal life and stuff, and adjusting to homeschooling kids and, sort of not getting to see grandparents and things like that there. So work-wise, things, probably like a lot of people, like outside of the conference circuit, in the IT industry, we have largely been able to work from home. So I feel sort of pretty grateful for how things have happened over the year. That could have been a lot worse, but yeah, sort of more reflective on my personal life and things like that and what's important, put things in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as frustrated as I am getting working from home and not being able to see one of my colleagues, actually one of our people in the chat here, Renee, says that he misses the live collaboration and drinking beer with friends. Yeah, well, all those things do weigh on you, especially in IT. We are really, really lucky that we can almost just not skip a beat and continue our role and you know, continue to receive that paycheck and have a roof over the head and all of those things that a lot of people you know, had taken away from them because of this pandemic. So that's a really cheery note that we've started off with. And I think we'll just hit this one more time before we move on to the really technical stuff. So I'll go with Eamonn first this time. What's been your biggest takeaway from the pandemic?
So, I mean, I guess we've sort of pushed the boundaries of what we can do remotely, you know, in terms of what we can achieve as an IT industry, what we can achieve as a training industry for me and Garth here. You know, and I think we have sort of made this leap about probably 10 years past where we'd have just got to naturally. So I'm sort of pretty impressed with sort of how we've reacted and how far we've come. It's definitely going to change things from now on. We're not going back to the way it was. So, you know, I think so the biggest takeaway is that it's never going to be like exactly how it was. We're going to be doing 50-50 time in the office, out of the office. We're going to be hot desking. You know, there's a lot more that we've sort of seen is possible because we've had to do it. And now it's actually is quite natural. So that's probably the biggest thing, is that things are never going to be the same again.
And Garth, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, but pretty much just to echo that. I mean, I think the biggest lesson is that for IT companies in general and IT training in particular, that we can be about 80% as effective, you know, even when working fully remote and even during a pandemic. And as Eamonn says, that lesson is going to be a complete game changer. So going forward, I think offices are going to be more like business incubators were, you know, before the pandemic, and drop-in centers and the place you go for that really important meeting. And maybe we'll end up doing things a little bit more like feature-driven development, where you have like intense workshops and focus groups with the client, and you get together and research a requirement and do poster board sessions and so on. But whatever way it goes, we're never going back to the way it was before.
So I promised that we would go into the technical right away, but I did see a question come up that kind of caught my eye on the chat. And this one is a bit more forward thinking than backward thinking, so I think it's a nice bridge. So Aaron would like to know, cream eggs or mini eggs?
Oh, yes. Well, I would normally say cream eggs, yes, although Marks and Spencer's mini eggs are absolutely delicious, but I can stop after the first catering packet if I want to. But a special shout out to my wife, who does the brownies, where you get the cream eggs and you freeze them, yeah, and then you slice them in half with a machete, and then you embed the half frozen cream egg in the brownie, and then bake the brownie. So you get brownie cream eggs, and those are food of the gods, you know. So my official answer is cream egg brownies. Yeah.
Right. So your wife clearly wants you to stick around for a while then.
Hopefully.
I really don't understand the question, because I just don't understand why we can't push the envelope and have both, you know.
It's a fair question. Why not both? So let's go more technical, as I promised. So how can you help your team transition from Java's object-oriented approach to Kotlin's functional approach? Let's start with Garth.
Okay, so first of all, absolutely appreciate the intent of the question, and it's a good question. Just to refactor the wording a little bit, I mean, I would say that Java and Kotlin are heading in the same direction, you know, so the question is being asked about the traditional stereotypical Java way of approaching the problem, but these days Java and Kotlin are both hybrid languages. You know, they both have OO and functional characteristics, and Kotlin has has the advantage of being clean and new and shiny and 2020 hindsight, which is always a wonderful thing, and not being burdened by backwards compatibility and so on. But they're very much heading in the same direction. And in fact, Eamonn, do you know of a developer event where people could find out more about modern JVM, development? Have you heard of such a thing?
I think there's something. Is it the end of this week? There's something. I think
some kind of development bash, perhaps.
Yeah, like a Bash JVM event or something Friday. I don't know. Yeah, I think so. Check out Friday. Check your calendars for Friday.
Yes, absolutely. I know what we're doing a dev bash on Friday. So we run a developer event in Belfast called Bash, and we're doing one on modern JVM development, where this is the very theme that's being discussed. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, the two languages are going in the same direction. And at the same time, I have friends from a small talk background who would say neither language is a woe, and they would be very clear on this point. And then I have a few friends who are very keen on their Haskell, and they would be very keen on the point that neither language is functional either, So there's a huge active debate there. But to take the question properly, the first thing I would advise is simply upgrade, because most major frameworks require Java 8 at a minimum these days. So therefore, they're increasingly functional. I mean, so you could go to JUnit 5 and there's assert throws, which takes a lambda and uses it as a thunk. You could go to the new architecture of Cucumber, where all the step definitions are given as lambdas. If you're doing Spring, you could go from Spring MVC to Spring Webflux, where everything's done through reactive programming, or you could do Spring Data, where you've got R2DBC, the new reactive way of talking to relational databases and so on. So the first thing I would say is just, upgrade the frameworks that you're using, and you'll find there's a lot of practice there of the essentials of the FP style. The other thing I would say is just take your internal test harness maybe, or any internal frameworks or anything like that, and do experiments, so try and write them in the functional style. Say in this Java code base, for example, we're just going to do everything using the stream API, so we're going to put the for and the while loop in a drawer, and we're going to use the stream API for everything. Or maybe there's Vaver or Vaver, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's a really good alternative collections library for Java, where it's more functional, everything's immutable and so on. Or there's a really good library from, I wrote his name down so I won't forget it, John Napier. So John Napier has done a really, really nice library of functional data structures, and he actually presented at GoTo back in 2019. So you can find a talk that he did there on YouTube. So he has a library with the unfortunate name of Lambda, which means it's impossible to find via Google search. But it's a really good library for exploring functional concepts in Java as well. So I would say those two things to begin with. Thing number one, upgrade your frameworks, and functional things will happen, And then thing number two, just take the projects that you're doing internally, your utilities, your test harnesses, and so on, and then just do experiments and try and write them in a more FP way.
Anything to add, Eamonn?
Yeah, so I mean, as Garth says, if you talk to purists, they will probably quite rightly say that neither's a functional language. But I guess what you can do is you can take pragmatic steps towards some of the useful parts of sort of other functional languages. So get in the habit of maybe thinking about and writing top level functions. So not everything has to be inside a class. So start to sort of, developers away from having to put everything inside a class. Start to sort of realize that interfaces which we create can be quite small, even down to a single method. Well, once you've done that, it's really just a function, and you can move people out of the pattern of like strategy, design patterns, and into just higher order functions. And once people start to get sort of a feel for treating functions as first class citizens, that's a big step. Then you can start to make use of some of the syntax like, expression bodied functions. So functions which are single expressions, and then starting to get in the habit of creating functions that are very, very small. You should be doing that anyway. You should be always trying to keep your functions as small as possible. 5 lines of code, around 10 lines of code, you start to get worried and you do a double take. Try to go the other way and get it down to like 1 line of code, 1 expression, and have lots and lots of composable functions. And then it depends if you're, as Garth says, like around the Stream API in Java 8, you know, if your developers are friendly or comfortable with that, then it's going to be very easy transition, because in Kotlin it's just going to be the same but simpler. And then because you've got a lot of these single line composable functions, they're very, you know, they're very easy to fold into that API. If they're not used to the Stream API, then it is going to be a little bit more of a learning curve. But just again, you know, make sort of a mandate that you always try to write it without a for loop, without a while loop first. You know, put those in the drawer, as Garth said, and just get people to be more comfortable with those basic collection pipeline functions. Because a lot of times when people think about functional programming, they're sort of a lot of times thinking about those collection pipeline functions. So just try to get the team totally comfortable with that. And then once they start doing that and they start passing functions around, the rest will sort of come over time. I'm definitely I'm not like a functional head. Like I just use enough to be pragmatic, and I sort of blend functional style and OO style and sort of just standard procedural stuff. If you want to get into the hardcore stuff within Kotlin, then you're getting into Arrow, and that's more Garth. Which direction is Garth? That's Garth's department. I'm trying to get the camera here. Garth's the hardcore functional head between us, and he's written a really good series on Medium there on different sort of high level functional things that you can do in Kotlin using the Arrow library. But that's like the end of, that's getting towards the end of your journey. Start slow, pair, code review, all of that stuff to try and sort of feed out these fundamental skills sort of through osmosis in the team.
Thanks so much for your input there. Really lot to unpack. Great thing that we can watch this later and it's not live in this app. So you mentioned sort of purists and opinions and having, you know, different opinions, and you gave your own. Brandon would like to know, he said, in the industry, there's many opinions on the best and the worst practices that are shared, and often people will misleadingly portray their opinions as facts. So even software engineers are not immune. So are there any practices that you consider valuable that are deemed, let's say, unacceptable by the rest of the industry? So something you think is maybe a bit unfashionable, but you still think is a good idea anyway. We'll go back to Garth.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I would say, you know, modeling is a good thing, okay? So I don't care what your Scrum coach has told you, okay? UML will not make you bold, okay? There is nothing wrong with drawing UML diagrams, okay? Again, this is something that goes back to the 90s where, you know, there was a huge drive to sell modeling tools, and the virtues of modeling were so old, and everybody had to draw a formal model and get it through review before you can write code and so on. So we made too much of this in the 90s, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing to draw software engineering diagrams, you know. So although it's not trendy or cool, you know, I'm a big fan of state charts. You know, I'm a big fan of UML class diagrams. I even draw a sequence diagram from time to time, but that's just between the three of us, okay? You know, the other thing I would say, again, this is something that was massively overdone back in the day, and we don't do it now as a reaction, is just developing frameworks internally, you know. So I think there is sometimes a good argument for where, you know, the standard framework that the industry uses does 10 times what you need, you know, and you just need a little bit, you know. So I think sometimes there is a good case to be made for developing a mini framework, you know, internally, especially when you need the learning, you know, especially when the project or the company needs to know that the underlying protocol, be it TCP IP or UDP or HTTP or whatever, you know, that the team really needs to chew that down to the bone. Then I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with writing a little micro framework within the team.
Oh, really, really interesting. I've kind of had the coaching, I guess, and input, and I'm sort of at the point where I reach my own opinion now. But, you know, you're better off to use a library rather than write it yourself, which I think is, of course, a nice rule of thumb. But there's always cases where, you know, maybe you do want to put that bit of extra effort into maintaining yourself and take maybe that little bit of risk, I suppose. Eamonn, do you have anything more to add? Are there any things that you love that are unfashionable?
So I think like Brandon sort of mentioned there, like about private fields and things like that. There's lots of like holy wars in our industry around that stuff, like the order of things. You know, I had a long argument with my sister around Christmas about whether or not you should be using semicolons in JavaScript or not. You know, those sorts of like things. I think consistency is more important than just making a decision rather than, you know, any one of those. So I think like sort of my recommendation to teams is always, you know, argue those things out at the start and then fire tools at the problem so that you don't have to ever talk about it again. You know, we're sort of got a mountain of linters and static analysis tools and things like that we can throw at our code bases, which will just basically reject code that doesn't obey the rules that we agree. The minutia of what we actually agree, I don't think is as important. You know, I will happily go into a code base which doesn't exactly adopt the style that I would do if I was like making all the rules myself. And I'm happy to go along with the consistency because that's gonna win out. You know, we want to spend our time thinking more about like high level things. Stuff that's sort of like widely seen as acceptable. I don't know if there's things that I would probably agree with that are like industry level unacceptable. There's lots of things that are unacceptable to certain groups, or, you know, there's certain practices that like functional people are really adamant about, and there's things, you know, like the Android developer community are very adamant about it should be done this way or that way, and Microsoft people and all of this. So there's certain groups that would find certain things unacceptable, but you go over to another group and completely natural. But things that are sort of widely agreed are bad ideas, I probably would agree with. Just echoing Garth's thing about the framework. So I do find that in certain spaces we are very much afraid to write our own code. There is sort of this policy of, you know, not invented here, is this fear of you know, using code outside of your industry. I think we've swung the other way too far, and now we're afraid to write any code ourselves, and we've like, you know, we're going to libraries if we want to like find out if a string is, you know, if we need to pad a string or something like that. You know, I think too often we're reaching for libraries when we could just take a little moment and realize, hey, this is 2 lines of code and I can have it shaped and control it to be exactly what I want, rather than spend a long time relying on someone else's code and reading how it works and then find out it's not fit for purpose and these sorts of things. So, but generally I would say, you know, just try to throw tools at the problem for the little things, and then spend more of your time thinking about the high level things.
I think one thing that we are very aware of as educators is that there's a problem where if you have a rule that's right 70% of the time or 80% of the time, and every teacher and every contractor and every consultant is, you know, rhyming off this rule as holy writ, then people forget very easily about the 20 or 30% of the time when it doesn't actually apply, you know, and you get things like that. You know, there was a debate this week about the solid principles and so on, you know, good ideas, you know, absolutely. But if that's all that you're saying and all that people are hearing, then they don't get to know about the exceptions to the rules. They don't get to know about the other stuff that's there and so on. So I think any rule, no matter how good, can be repeated and followed to the point of stupidity, you know.
Absolutely.
It's so much...
The model is not the territory. So, or the map is not the territory. So everything is going to be a little bit off in varying degrees. And, you know, it's up to us as engineers when to say, oh, this model works, or this model doesn't work. Or maybe I can make this model work with a little bit of custom implementation. But I'm so sorry that, Eamonn, were you about to say something, or can we move on?
I was just going to say, just to echo what you're saying there, I mean, you sort of made the point for me. So much of it is based upon context. It's going to depend on the kinds of things that you're building, the kinds of tools that you're using, the people that you have around you. You know, it's so much context based that, you know, I never try to be too militant. There's definitely I've some firm held beliefs and strategies that I use when I'm doing development, but I'm also always open to doing it a different way, because you have to be able to do that. There is no firm lines. Everything's fuzzy. There's only these sort of shades of gray. And if you do that, if you're always sort of ready to bend, then generally speaking, you'll have a much easier time than if you try to rigidly adhere to something and, you know, use a square when it's a round hole and things like that, you know.
Yeah. So we will move on. It is Brandon again. I feel a bit weird giving him 2 goes, but it reminded me of a talk that I really like from you two, which is about lessons from the 1990s that maybe modern developers, aren't aware of or should be aware of. So he wants to know what frustrates you about both the modern web environment and modern web developers. Are there any changes of your lessons from that talk that you think are super important, or anything new that you've thought of this year? Let's start with Garth.
Yeah, no, this was kind of the subject of a talk I did for FFS TechConf. Yeah, so this is too polite an event to say what the FFS stood for, but you can possibly work it out. And that's the Twitter handle, and the transcripts of all the talks are online. But long story short, I think everything. If I had the opportunity, I would probably change everything about the web. Because you've got a markup language designed for sharing the abstracts of physics papers. You've got a way of laying things out that's biased towards a magazine layout style rather than any kind of UI. And you've got a programming language that was written at high speed, and although a work of genius, also has some serious issues, So whenever you throw all of those three things into the cauldron, it gets really interesting. So as I like to say, imagine you had a kind of VB6 developer from the early to mid 90s, and they were frozen in time, and you thawed them out and said, let me show you software development today. Well, they would be going, this is amazing. This will be like Minority Report, if they'd seen Minority Report, which of course they wouldn't have, but that they would be expecting like 3-dimensional holographic pie charts, and putting on the VR goggles and moving everything around and all this kind of stuff. And then we'd show them Amazon or eBay or any modern web app, and they'd be like, what? So at the end of the day, the web has given us many, many, many wonderful things, but in many other ways, it's also been a little bit of a retrograde step, So, but I mean, the good news is that things are changing. I mean, TypeScript is absolutely wonderful. I think TypeScript is an absolutely brilliant language, and in some of the new features that they've introduced, it's even going, far ahead of the server-side languages. So there's amazing stuff there. I think Angular and React, and maybe these days I would give React the advantage. They're now really good and really powerful ways of developing web applications. And I think we've kind of abstracted and layered and so on to the point where it is becoming quite a nice environment. And it's the nature of software engineering that you can't just do revolutionary change. You can't rewire every browser on the planet, in an instant. So we're pretty much stuck with what we've got. But if I had a magic wand, it would be Izzy Wizzy, I change everything,
And Eamonn?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start from the position that I don't have a wand and can't change everything. So like if we sort of think about, things that annoy me, I guess there's lots of stuff that Garth mentioned there, like the different sort of technology choices that we're now stuck with. But probably like in terms of like our own attitudes and our own ways of working, probably like churn and reinventing the wheel. We do this a lot in our industry in general, but I think like, the gold star in first place definitely goes to web developers. You just need to look at, the package count on NPM. You've got like 1.5 million packages there or something like that. There's just so much noise and so much rubbish in there, as well as the really, really good stuff. So, whenever you come to do any sort of web development and you say, this is my problem, now let me choose between the 100 solutions that are available, and let me look at the 100 different blog posts that say 100 different ways of doing it. So that sort of stuff like really frustrates me, and it's really hard for like people who are entering the industry and saying, okay, how should I do this? And they're just given this like deluge of options. Now to be fair, it has got a lot better. I mean, if you go back 5 years, if you go back 10 years, it was a lot more unstable. And we have sort of seen like a couple of big frameworks coming through that are just that are sort of bringing a bit of stability, and most people are developing using this package or that package, and the tooling has got really good, and the language features and support within these frameworks has got really good. So it is a lot better today than it was 5 years ago. But just generally, going after the new shiny thing and rewriting it and then rewriting all the tools and all that. I just feel that we could have cured cancer by now if we hadn't sort of been spinning our wheels so much. So that's sort of the things that frustrates me. In terms of like just general development, I think again making it easier for people to start projects. So things like React and Angular and these sort of frameworks are really good because they can sort of give you a bootstrap project that says now start solving client problems. But if you sort of step outside of those arenas, it's quite difficult sometimes to get your project started. And a lot of times what I find when I'm talking to developers that have maybe joined a company and there's a project in place, they've no idea how any of it sort of comes together. They're just adding code and copy and pasting code and tweaking things, and they don't actually know how it all ties together. And in fact, no one does, because the person that set it up has left the company, and these sorts of things. So I think if we could get some sort of standard project shapes and some standard tooling around that, sort of similar to like the way that Angular has done it, I think that could help again further standardize things and stabilize things. And then if I'm just allowed to like say things that I can just say and then I'm going to get them, then I love TypeScript. TypeScript's definitely probably like one of my favorite languages at the moment. So I'd like a few, if I'm getting everything for Christmas, I'd like a few extra features within the language just to bring it in line with some of the more modern languages like Kotlin and stuff. Like, so I'd like to be able to do function composition. I'd like extension methods, and I'll send you a list, Adele. I'll just send you a list of things that I want, and then you can let me know when they're in.
Yeah, look, I have a few contacts. I'll reach out and I'll let you know. So since we've mentioned Kotlin and TypeScript a little bit, we have a question from someone called Tara Simpson. I think you might know him. Anyway, he asks, does Kotlin have a life outside of mobile, and has TypeScript won?
Cool. Shall I take that first?
Yeah,
or?
Sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a lot of the inquiries and a lot of the a lot of the Kotlin work that we do these days would be server side. So with Spring Boot, for example, Kotlin's a first-class language for Spring Boot. And if you're doing something heavily reactive like the new web flux stuff, the reactive database access that we mentioned before, I mean, I definitely choose Kotlin over that for Java because it's so much nicer. And then Kotlin comes in the 3 flavors that all modern programming languages have to come in. So you can have the version that translates to JavaScript, the version that goes native, and then the version that runs on the JVM. So if you go back a few years, I would say that Kotlin was just, it stood a very good chance of being triumphant in all 3 areas. That these days I see it being dominant on the JVM. On the JavaScript side, it's got very strong competition now with TypeScript, but it's not an either or thing, because there's an interoperability story there, and both sides are going to have to work to get that right, and both languages are evolving at a rapid pace and so on. But there's no reason why TypeScript and Kotlin JS can't coexist, And then the same thing with Kotlin native. I think it was very, very interesting, still is, but it's now facing a strong challenge from Rust. I mean, I think Rust is the clear contender in that area. But again, there's an interop story and so on, But yeah, no, I think Kotlin can do very well in all kinds of environments, but it's got some, it's got strong competition at the moment. We really live in a polyglot programming world, and the days when developers were told, the answer is Java, what's the problem? Or the answer is C#, what's the problem? Those days are long gone. So it's a brave new world. It's a marketplace of ideas, and Kotlin's going to have to fight in there just like any other programming language.
Do you have anything to add, Eamonn?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think TypeScript has won. The race is definitely not over. I think in some arenas, they can definitely sit side by side. It's only really, it's only really in a few arenas where they're going head to head. I think they both are great languages. We're doing a lot of TypeScript at the minute. Certainly if we just look at how much we're seeing TypeScript and how many people are asking for TypeScript, it's definitely the thing that we're seeing most people requesting training for recently. It's just massive, and that's both server side for Node and then also for web development. And you can, of course, develop mobile apps, and you can do things like React Native and these sorts of things. But I think Kotlin will always have an advantage certainly for Android development. Will always, well, quite often will have an advantage in the server side space because of just the Java legacy. But I think that the race is definitely not over. It will be interesting to see where Kotlin JS goes, if it makes any headroads. I think their interop with JavaScript and TypeScript is cleaner than trying to use languages like F# and Scala and Kotlin and trying to put those into the browser. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Yeah, it'll just be watch this space. I just hope they feel enough heat from each side that they take the languages features. So I want some TypeScript features in Kotlin, and I want some Kotlin features in TypeScript, and that'll make my life easier. So I'm hoping they keep it at loggerheads.
I definitely agree with that. I think it's always good if you have two or more contenders, all fighting for the prize, and then that just spurs each side to innovate or cross-pollinate, as I politely like to put it, and so on. And you end up with the best features everywhere. But it's one of these things that's really difficult to predict. I mean, if we were to go back 2 or 3 years, we were seeing tremendous demand for Python, and it really looked like Python was going to be, a really dominant language on the server with AWS, the language of big data, the language of academia, all this kind of thing. And we're still getting an awful lot of demand for Python, but it's certainly tailed off, so we would no longer bet on it to be the one true language. So it's weird. The industry can go in stops and starts and make sudden changes, and things go in and out of fashion. So it's really hard to predict. My job would be so much easier if we could.
Yeah, we could even make the argument that one of the reasons that the Java cadence has increased and that we are seeing features records in Java is by Kotlin and its popularity. Who knows where Java would be without Kotlin? So let's move on. Let's have a look. Sorry, we've got a few questions coming in. Yeah, that's the question I wanted to ask, was about testing in Kotlin. This one's come through on the chat. So in Kotlin, how does testing work if it's a top-level function? Neil Armstrong is his name, so we must feel very privileged to have him here. He said, last I used it, last I used it, it was quite difficult to mock these top-level functions out. Do you want to take this one, Eamonn?
Well, I'm actually going to bat this one over to Garth because Garth's our Kotlin expert, so I'm immediately going to bat it over to him.
All right. Garth?
Yeah, no, I think this is one of those situations where you need to know what the Kotlin compiler is actually doing for interoperability with Java, and that whenever you declare a top-level function inside a file, well, the default behavior is that you're going to get a class with the same name as the file, and then inside there you'll get a function for the top-level function that you declare. So you first and foremost, you have to know that that's actually going on, and then once you're aware of that, there are ways that your testing can proceed. And if you want to give it a different name, and this might be a good idea, it depends on your naming conventions and so on. Well, then there's an annotation specifically for that. Yeah, but it's definitely one of those pain points, that whenever you get to testing Kotlin code, especially if you're coming at it with a Java style tool set and so on. So I think that's worth a blog post. Yeah, so I will commit to doing a blog post on that one.
Wonderful. Awesome. So I will now ask a question of Eamonn. Let's keep it light. So what technology are you enjoying most these days? You already said that TypeScript kind of has your heart a little bit at the moment. Is there anything else?
No, probably TypeScript is the one that I'm really, like, since the start of the year, that has been pretty much everything that I'm doing. And then TypeScript with other things. So TypeScript on Node and TypeScript with React and TypeScript with Angular. So I've just gone TypeScript crazy this year. That's most of what I'm looking at. There's lots of things that I'm sort of looking in the horizon for. So definitely Rust is on my radar as something that I want to sort of investigate a lot more. And that will be sort of the next thing. But at the minute, I'm just been loving TypeScript, and TypeScript 4.2 was just out there a few weeks ago. So I just wrote a blog post, was published yesterday, just going into sort of some of the details around, say, like the way that you can do programming with the type system. So it's not stuff that you'll be doing all the time, but it's things that you can't do in other languages, like, say, for example, Java and C# and Kotlin. You can't basically produce new types from other types in sort of programmatic means, like removing methods and adding methods and looking at the parameters of functions and all of these sorts of things. So I've been just delving deeply into TypeScript at the moment. There's not much other technology that's really grabbing my attention at the minute. We're all playing with the different sort of training mediums and streaming tools, and you're using this streaming tool at the minute. We're obviously doing a lot of online talks and training and playing with those things. Obviously using sort of JetBrains Space as one of our tools for sort of sharing out code and chats and things like that there, and collaborating with people during training. So those are the main things that I'm playing with, the stuff that's sort of necessity. And then the things that I'm enjoying most is just delving into TypeScript's compiler.
And Garth, what's the story for you?
I am simultaneously trying to teach myself Haskell, Rust, and Reason, and failing miserably at all three. So if you look behind me, I'm kind of surrounded by bookshelves, and I have my shelf of shame, where there are all the books that I should have read but haven't yet. And I've got a bunch of worthy books in Haskell. I've got some Rust stuff and so on. So anytime I have some free time, I kind of pull down one of those and go through a chapter and try and write some code and so on. And I'm learning Haskell for the third time, so it's kind of a Christmas ritual for me, where I managed to get 2/3 of the way through the basics of Haskell, and then the real world intrudes and I don't pick it up for a year. But they say third time is the charm. So hopefully that this time round I'll get it. Apart from that, the other thing I'm playing with is I'm really into my DDD. I'm a huge fan of DDD, and that's partially because I've got a philosophy degree, and I have this rant that I inflict on people, which is that DDD is just computer science catching up with where philosophy was in the 1950s, So I enjoy writing angry blog posts to that effect. Exploring the relationship between what we are doing in software engineering through DDD and the philosophy of linguistics and Chomsky, and especially the ideas of people like Wittgenstein. That's one of my hobbies.
So you've mentioned that you are learning, Garth. It's something I think it came from you, that becoming a programmer means signing up for homework for the rest of your life.
That was my favorite tweet. You can look it up on Twitter. I think that was my favorite tweet of 2018. So I apologize. I've forgotten the name of the original author, but I think the exact wording was programmers are people who volunteer to do homework for the rest of their lives. So I think that's very true. Yeah.
So willingness to do homework, we would say, is an important non-development skill for developers to have. What are some other skills that are really important for developers to have that isn't necessarily the technical aspects of programming? Let's go with Eamonn first.
So probably for me, being able to communicate is the big one. And there's different sort of levels of that, but generally speaking, like when I'm talking to teams and I'm talking to sort of developers and they're talking about the different problems that they're having, a lot of times, they'll be saying about this person's trying to do this and this other person's not doing that. And, a lot of times I just want to scream and shake them and go, but have you talked to them? Have you asked them why they're doing that? What's their motivation? Have you explained why it's important to you that it's done this way? Communication is just a big part of it. And they're just things that are going to be useful to you in your day-to-day life, as well as within development. But communication is key. So being able to, write is part of that. So being able to sort of write with good grammar and being able to clearly express your ideas, doing, you know, expression in different methods. So being able to draw a diagram. Garth was talking about UML, blah, you know, but other diagrams, you know, simpler diagrams, things like that. You know, those are things that you really are essential. Also, you know, just general sort of, again, very high level sort of life lessons, you know, having empathy and being able to understand where like the people in your team are coming from, where your clients are coming from, and trying to understand things from their point of view, and then ask the relevant questions that lead you to sort of a common understanding. Those are just absolutely essential. They're difficult skills to master, and they will evolve as you you know, as you're on the job. But just being able to talk and being honest as well in your communication, and, you know, expressing things clearly. Then there's other things like having a thick skin and being able to, you know, take criticism and understand, you know, take it as a very objective thing, that, you know, let's talk about the pros and cons of what I've done here, and let's sort of try to use this as a learning experience and not take things personally, and then close up again, keep communicating. It's just a lot of it just keeps coming back to that sort of stuff. So yeah, communication.
And Garth?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, a huge +1 on everything Eamonn has said. I would add, like, whenever we're doing any kind of agile session these days, or whenever we're running a requirements event, or, you know, something where the client's involved, we're really big on event storming, impact mapping, Wordly maps, and so on. And these are things that you can go out and learn the essentials of in a few hours. I mean, for Wordly mapping, for example, there's a tremendous, you know, online book by the inventor of the concept that takes you through absolutely everything. So I think those are 3 tools that every developer should have in their toolbox. And then, as Eamonn says, talking to people, I would add being able to talk to the client, you know. So I've worked with an awful lot of professional salespeople, and you know, that's an education. I mean, whenever I started out, you know, I was very much this product, good product, you like product, you buy product, you know. That was kind of my sales pitch, you know. And I got taken aside by some very experienced salespeople, and it was a case of, right, Garth, you know, now we're going to learn how to talk to the client, you know. So communication skills are always going to be really important, whether it's within the team, or talking to other teams, or management within the company, or the client, and so on. And these are all just other people at the end of the day, you know. They will not bite, you know. So it's really good to be able to develop a fluency, you know, in the way that you talk to people outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, Garth, I would just have to add that clients are people too, you know.
Yes.
They're not just for Christmas.
Absolutely. A client is forever, and is to be loved and valued. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they pay your salary, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So we have a question from Mark Patterson, and he says that so Eamonn mentioned that the pandemic sort of pushed the industry maybe about forward 10 years, a bit of a catalyst for progress. Do you have any concerns about what we might have left behind?
Yeah, is that for me as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the social interaction, I think, I don't know if we have left it behind. We still have a necessity of leaving some things behind, but I think maybe it's reinforced the importance of like social interaction and building the team and actually human contact, and you know, I think we're all still hardworking and things like that, but I think we've also sort of realized that, you know, again, it's put things in perspective, and we've understood the importance of family and work-life balance and all of these things. So I'm not so concerned that we've left things behind. I'm still annoyed that there's certain things that I can't do, that I can't go into the office, that I can't talk to people face to face. But that will come back. I think that will come back, but it will come back in a more controlled way. So it'll happen, you know, only a couple of days a week, or it'll be very coordinated that we'll come in for certain events. So I think like the office might become more of a place where we do these specialized social interactions, or we do the team building, or we do the exceptional thing where we all need to be together physically in a room, and we'll really, really enjoy those, because the other times we'll be remoting and things like that. So I'm not too concerned. There's definitely things that I've missed over the pandemic, but I think the ones that are important we'll do again, and the things that aren't important, or the things that we've we weren't taking as seriously before, that we are taking very seriously now, like the importance of our family, like the importance of, you know, showing respect to your colleagues and actually just enjoying their company and things like that. I think we'll double down on those in the future. So I'm pretty optimistic. I'm a super optimistic guy, aren't I, Garth?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. You know, I'm team pessimist. That's my official rule.
So what do you miss then? I'm sure you've got a long list.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did an internal session on this. It was one of our product managers. She gave a really good talk on this. And the point she made was that you're not remote working. You're remote working during a pandemic, you know, and that has to be taken into consideration. And I think what's happened over the past year is we've done effectively a lot of experiments. We've been forced to experiment. And as Eamonn says, we've pushed the limits of the possible, you know, and we know what we can do. But now, you know, that element of face-to-face contact and, you know, the things that can never be replaced by just being in the same room, you know, as the other people, we need to find the best possible way to reintroduce that, you know. So I think it's a little bit like a professional boxer. You know, they'll do a session where they take one of their arms and literally tie it behind their back, you know, or they'll tell them, you know, you're restricted to hooks or an uppercut or something like that, and then after the session they'll say, right, what do you learn? You know, and what are you going to take back into your regular style? So it's kind of like that, you know. For the past year we've been fighting with one arm tied behind our back, and we've been forced to do everything in the most remote distributed way possible. So there's you know, there's been a lot of things lost along the way, you know. They're all the benefits of human contact, but it's up to us once the pandemic ends to find the best way to blend everything together and get the most of both experiences.
Yeah, I think one thing for a lot of people is the few extra hours a day you might get from your commute, depending how long your commute is. So maybe being only forced to do that once or twice a week means that you've bought those extra hours to spend on either a hobby or with your family or on something else that you enjoy. So we have a question from chat. It's a non-technical question again. He wants to know a bit more about the team lead role. He says he hasn't heard much about it in the Netherlands. I'm the only Dutch-based person here, and I've only worked at one company here. And we're very flat. So I don't really necessarily have the best input there. But can you provide your insight from England and Ireland? Is that a popular role there, or how do you see that role fitting into a team lead? Start with Eamonn.
So it does. It's not just like a country boundary thing. It will very much depend on like company to company. You'll see people adopt different strategies to that role and put different weightings behind it. My own personal sort of strategy for sort of living that role is about making yourself completely redundant. And sort of trying to make yourself as replaceable as possible. So what you're doing there is trying to enable the team and build the team and basically just turn the team into as effective unit as you can. So a lot of it is about mentoring and about sharing knowledge as much as possible. It's about giving people the freedom to feel, and really it's about instilling these ideas into the team and sort of really living it so that everybody in the team starts to sort of follow those practices. Like one of sort of my most sort of happiest moments whenever I was in this role was when one of the junior devs sort of corrected me and said, hey, look, we need to be doing this, and I'm like, yes, you're right. Haha, now I can step away and you can just run this by yourselves. And that's really what you want to do. It's really about enabling the team and making them grow, because then the whole team will be more effective. So it's getting yourself out of the way, and leading by example. But other teams, it will be more managerial type role. It will be more a title and about showing your importance and leading by authority. But I don't subscribe to that school myself.
Garth, do you have anything more to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, yes to everything Eamonn has said. I mean, it's one of these things within agile software methodologies where the command and control responsibilities are supposed to kind of dissolve within the team as a whole, and people are supposed to sign up to things voluntarily, and you know that the different responsibilities should get allocated out fairly and equitably, and so on. But then there's always going to be times when that doesn't work. You know, maybe you're a small IT department in a much larger company with an awful lot of formality and ceremony and so on, and the rest of the business requires, you know, really stringent reporting rules or stuff like this, you know. So there's any number of contexts where it will work very well or it won't work and so on. And the companies that we work with, you know, you'd see many different variations on how you handle that particular concept, you know. So I once heard it expressed as that, you know, if you're a leader in an agile team, then you want to give people enough rope to grow and explore, but not so much that they hang themselves, you know. And I think that's what it comes down to. You know, if you're the senior and you know that the other people in the team are more junior to you, then you want to nurture them and help them grow and so on. But equally, they may not be aware where the lines in the sand are. They may not be aware of how far they can push an issue before bad things happen, and there's, you know, blowback from the rest of the company and so on, you know. So it's all about the situation that the team's in and your seniority relative to the other members, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes it does just being sort of the decision maker at key points, especially when there's disagreement in terms of like the path that we're going to take, and there's sometimes where you just need to sort of weigh in and say, we're going to do it this way, and this is sort of why we're going to do it, and then, you know, we can review it later on. So sometimes you do have to sort of be the decision maker and bring in a little bit of authority, but you're making sure that you're including everyone's sort of ideas in that decision making and making sure that they're aware of it. But no, I did have a conversation last week with a colleague and just about the importance of then also knowing when to stop the conversation and get work done and move forward. So that is and learning where that line is difficult. It is difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. That line in the sand of making a decision, it's tricky to know where to put that line. So I think we're going to head towards wrapping up now. So I'll ask our last question. Considering you guys have so much experience as software trainers, what makes, in your mind, a good trainer or a great trainer? We'll start with Eamonn.
So, well, good trainer, I think, you know, you have to know the material, you have to be sort of good at timekeeping and you know, knowing the agenda, being professional, all those sorts of things. Just the sort of the minimum requirement to be in a good trainer. But I think if you're going to be a great trainer, then you've got to sort of develop a lot of empathy. You've got to basically understand the context, being able to sort of think on your feet and react. You know, sometimes you'll go into the room and, you know, you'll be told that everyone on the team has skills X, Y, and Z, and then you get there and they don't have either X, Y, or Z. And then you have to very much sort of react and think on your feet and be able to adjust. Because my goal when I'm going in there is to basically make sure that everybody gets sort of the most training, you know, into their brains as they can, and they can move forward as much as they can relative to where they are right now. So you have to be able to sort of be able to think on your feet. You have to be empathetic and be a real good active listener. I think as well, to be a great trainer, you got to be sociable. You got to be somewhat funny and keep things light, because it's a lot easier to learn when you're relaxed, and you can sort of build up a bit of rapport and as we would say here, you know, have a bit of banter in the room. That does make things a lot nicer. And then as well, just, yeah, you have to really know your material, because I find like delegates will learn a lot better if they have confidence in your capabilities, and they can sort of see that you know your stuff and the things that you're telling them are correct, and then they'll focus on learning the material. But if they're in any doubt, then they'll start second guessing you, and they'll just not have confidence in the material that you're delivering. So all of those things will I think make you a great trainer, as well as just hardworking. Lots of hard work. A bit of polish. Yeah.
And Garth?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything Eamonn says. I mean, I usually sum it up as 3 Ps, you know. So first of all, you need passion for the subject. I mean, you really need to enjoy and like and understand the thing it actually is that you're communicating to people, whether that's a programming language or a framework or an approach to software design or whatever, you know. So if you have a passion and a deep background and an understanding, and especially an understanding of the history, because so many things these days you need to put it into context and explain why something is the way it is and why there are 4 different ways of doing X and which is the most valuable and so on. So I think it's that putting things in a context and historical perspective that's particularly valuable, you know, as compared to just going out and reading the latest version of the documentation, because as an industry, we're really, really bad, you know, at maintaining our own history. And if you've been parachuted into using a framework that's been around for 8 years, you know, there's going to be so much there that's going to confuse you, you know, not in terms of how do I do X, but why, you know, why do I do X as opposed to all the other ways, you know. So the second P I would say is perseverance, you know, because you have to accept that if you're a full-time trainer, you're going to be doing this week in, week out, you know. And as Eamonn says, there will be the bad deliveries, there will be the deliveries where people got switched at the last time, or there was a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, you know. That this happens everywhere in all things, you know. So there will be the deliveries when things just don't go right, you know, and you have to take the professional approach and do the best possible thing you can. And then I would say that the final thing, and this is the most important thing I would say, is preparation, you know, because whenever I'm talking to people who are moving into a training role, they're usually filled with enthusiasm, and they'll say, look, I'll make it like a TED talk, and I'll have all these great images and single words, and I'll live code everything, and it'll be brilliant, you know. And I always say, maybe it will be, but just imagine you've flown halfway around the world, you know, and they've lost your luggage, as has happened to me on multiple occasions, you know, and you've woken up after a few fitful hours sleep with a migraine, and how can I put this politely, you know, lower intestinal distress, you know, and you go into the training room, and you know, all the things Eamonn mentioned have happened and so on, and then you still have to do the delivery, you know. So your beautiful deck of single image slides and your aspirations of live coding, everything, you know, they're going to go downhill very rapidly at that point. So whenever you do our job, I think you look at people who present, in particular, you look at comedians, yeah, and you think, you know, whenever you saw them before you became a trainer, you think they're just making it up on the spot, you know. But once you look at them with your, you know, your trainer's eyes switched on, you realize the amount of preparation and the amount of craft that goes into what they do. I mean, I was listening to Dara O'Brien, you know, the famous Irish comic, and he was talking about the preparation that all he does for his shows, you know, which are supposedly completely live and spontaneous and so on, but the work and the craft that has to go into it. So I think Bono said it best when he said the hardest part is making it look spontaneous, you know. So yeah. Just you know, be aware of the amount of preparation that will be required. I mean, it is an iceberg. There's a lot of work there behind the scenes, especially for virtual deliveries. I would say that's the biggest thing we've learned, that in a classroom-based delivery, you can go, oh, I forgot that, and put it up on the whiteboard. And if you got it wrong, wipe it out and put it up again, you know. Or one of the delegates can nudge, you know, their neighbor and say, you know, what the hell was that? I was asleep for the past 3 minutes, you know. But obviously that's a lot more difficult to do in a virtual delivery. So it's prep, and then prep again, you know.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to look effortless. Speaking of looking effortless on the stage, this is a question I picked up from LinkedIn. What is the best Beyonce album and why?
The latest one?
Yes, I'll do the Father Ted response. That would be an ecumenical matter. Yes.
I did see you put an answer though on LinkedIn, so you've let me down a little bit, guys.
I said, "Thus spake Zarathustra," which was a joke to the philosophy inclined person who asked the question. So I will not commit myself to an album at this stage. That they're all brilliant and it'll be a superb match, you know. So.
Garth, who's Beyonce?
I don't want
one of these newfangled pop singers, you know. So is very big in the hit parade, you know. So
yeah, Beyonce's the famous one. Anyway, so on that note, I don't want to offend any Beyonce fans out there, so I'm just going to leave it alone. I do need to wrap up. So firstly, thanks so much, Garth and Eamonn. It's been great having this chat with you today. So if you did enjoy the session today, you are in luck because Garth and Eamonn are involved in a large number of events. That's part of the gig of being a professional trainer and speaker. So they already mentioned they have their own developer group, DevBash. I did put the handle there in the chat on YouTube. They have an event coming up on Friday, the 26th of March, so just in 2 days. They also have some accelerated Python and TypeScript courses coming up in April and May. And after what I just heard, make sure that you are ready for an accelerated course before signing up. So also in April is the online conference for GoTo, which is called Gotopia Chicago. That one is an online conference. So if you can make the time zone or you're a night owl or a morning or whatever works for you, that one's all online. So you don't need to be in Chicago to attend. But last and not least is that perhaps if you don't want to attend a full conference from home, the next live AMA is with me, and it's on the 21st of April. I'll be interviewing or asking questions of Enya Corey. She's an author of Retrospectives Anti-Patterns. So we should get a lot of sort of team-based conversation today, not necessarily all technical. That's sure to make for an awesome conversation. So that's it from me today. Thanks to everyone involved, Garth, Eamonn, and also our wonderful participants. I do look forward to having you tune in next time. So as we say in the Netherlands, doei!